This is Donovan Ferguson, not to be confused with Jonathan Ferguson, keeper of firearms and artillery at the Royal Armouries Museum in the UK. Today, Donovan will be going over some of his favourite games that feature the M16A1 and inspired him to do his retro rifle build. This video is satirical by nature and not to be taken seriously. Donovan is not a real firearms expert, he's just the great value version of Jonathan Ferguson. Now, off to Donovan. Pause. In typical Call of Duty fashion, we've got the optical sight up front, and we've got some interesting things going on here. So first off, the optical sight that Call of Duty so typically puts into their games typically are quite whimsical with their red dot sights, things of this nature. However, this sight appears to be based on a real thing as far as I'm aware. US military was experimenting with sniper rifle, variant of the M16, but typically it would be mounted on the carry handle. The way that they have it mounted in game appears to be a bit peculiar. We've actually got an M16 here in the museum, but this piece of carry handle appears to have been sawed off, where typically that sight would sit above the carry handle and replaced with what appears to be some sort of bolt into the upper receiver. As you can see, there's a hole for mounting optical sights, things of that nature. Something quite interesting about the firearm in game is that the front sight post is completely missing. Now, this would essentially render the firearm a bolt-action firearm instead of a fully automatic or semi-automatic firearm, because the sight post acts as a sort of gas block. The round will travel through the barrel and the gases will enter the gas block, travel through the gas tube, back into the bolt carrier group, extracting that previous casing and chambering a new round. So essentially you have a useless weapon, not something perhaps a GI would like to have in the jungles fighting Charlie. One of the first things that caught my attention was they're outfitted with 30 round magazines. However, they appear to be the standard issue 20 round magazines. Also, this model appears to have an excessive amount of rust on this particular GI's weapon, not something that at the time, new rifle would have had very much of, unless this individual soldier had left his rifle perhaps in a lake or stream, and the aluminum had rusted from that. But we're seeing unusual amounts of wear on the rifle at this point in the war. As far as the rear aperture goes, it is enlarged as you would expect. Video games typically, for gameplay purposes I assume, have a rather enlarged rear aperture sight for the player to be able to visually see their enemies and what they're shooting at. It's very typical as far as gaming goes. Losing him. Pause. Another thing I've noticed is the presence of what appears to be a C7 upper receiver, which were not present. The C7 upper is something that was created by Canadians later on after the M16A1 variant, and not something you would see fielded by a standard US infantry soldier during the Vietnam War. Now, depicted in the game appears to be an M203 launcher with a heat shield up front. Now, I believe this level in the campaign takes place in 1968, if I'm not mistaken. The M203 was not fielded officially by US troops until 1969, so it's possible that some special units had access to the M203 that I'm not aware of. Another point of contention is the fact that the rear aperture sits above the carry handle. Quite whimsical, because if you drop your rifle, you would dent the rear aperture and permanently damage it, preventing you from being able to use your rifle effectively in combat. And oddly enough, the firearm is depicted full auto in the campaign, and in multiplayer, a 3-round burst weapon. As you can see, we've got safe, semi, and fully automatic fire. The 3-round burst is something that would not come later until the M16A2 in the 80s. military had cited ammo conservation as a reason for the addition of the burst fire, not something that was initially added during the Vietnam War. Something I've noticed right away is the presence of what appears to be an A2 rear aperture sight on the fixed within the carry handle. As you can see, the actual M16A1 rear aperture sight is small, very circular in nature. The one in-game appears to be that of the M16A2, something that you would not have seen during the Vietnam War. I assume once again this is done for gameplay purposes. Rising Storm 2 is considered a more simulator style of game, perhaps a little more realistic than Call of Duty or something of that nature. Other than that, this model appears to be the most accurate so far. Pause. So, as you see the player running over the body of the dead, I assume, Viet Cong or North Vietnamese army, you can see for a split second the presence of what appears to be a 30-round magazine. Now, these were fielded to some limited use towards the end of the war. We've actually got one in the museum, a 30-round fitted with jungle tape. Typically, what would be seen would be the traditional 20-round magazines, and the 30 rounds were not really common use until after the war. If you enjoy the content and you enjoy the firearms history, things of that nature, then I implore you to subscribe and like, comment as well, as it really helps us out. If you're interested in firearms, go ahead and smash that like button. Thank you.